Good afternoon. How are you today? I'm doing well, and I'm excited about today because the holidays are quickly approaching us, and in your bio, not your bio, but your little headliner there, it says, are you a follower or a leader? Or do you like the game Follow the Leader? And which one best suits you, being the leader or being the follower? Some people say that you can't be a great leader unless you know how to follow. I don't know that I agree with that. How about you? Let me know in the chat box. So today we are in the third chapter of Mark. We're closing on the third chapter of Mark. So let me read the scripture first, and then I'm going to give you an overview as to where we are and how we got here, or where Jesus is and how he got there in this book. The 12 apostles are about to be selected. And so this scripture is probably pretty familiar to some of you, but this is the Gospel of Mark, and we've decided to use Mark because Mark is the gospel that teaches. I always tell people, if you want to learn how to be a disciple, if you want to learn that thing that we're supposed to be doing, then you go to the Gospel of Mark. It's the action gospel, I call it. The Gospel of Matthew, my favorite, is the teaching gospel. So this one's a little different than what Luke and Matthew described during this period in which Jesus picked the 12 followers. So it says here in Mark 3, verses 13 through 19. And he went up on the mountain and called to him those he himself wanted. I'm going to repeat that. And he went up on the mountain and called to him those he himself wanted. And they came to him. Then he appointed 12, that they might be with him, and that he might send them out to preach, and to have power to heal sicknesses, and to cast out demons. Simon, to whom he gave the name Peter, James the son of Zebedee, and John the brother of James, the sons of thunder, Andrew, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James the son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, Simon the Canaanite, and Judas Iscariot, who also betrayed him. And they went into a house. So there are a couple of things I just kind of want to quickly go through right quick. Just mention before I give that little recap on how we got to 3 and where we are in the whole scenario of what Jesus is doing. And right here where it says that then he appointed 12. So remember the verse before, this sentence before that says that he called them unto him himself. So, and then he picked 12, which means that it was more than 12 that he called unto himself. So there were many that went up on the mountain that were following him, which means that there were also more than 12 that wanted to be a part of the 12. But he himself picked 12 from the multitude of those that he selected to come up onto the mountaintop. And that's important. And it's also important in Matthew, the teaching gospel, it talks about the fact that he was up on the mountain the whole night before, which kind of begs to say whether or not he actually called them up onto the mountain, or when he came down from the mountain after being there all night, after praying all night before doing this task that is so important, which is another reminder for you and me that when we embark on anything, even when we know we're being led or whatever, that it is so important that we pray going into those large decisions or those small decisions that we're going to make, to get that additional clarity and direction and guidance. But also, my point here is that then he appointed 12 that they might be with him, and so that he could send them out to not just preach, but it says preach and to have power to heal sicknesses and to cast out demons. So of course the differential there, and to cast out demons, is saying that a lot of sickness had to do with the sins that people were involved in. A lot of times that's where the demon possession piece came in, what they thought to be demon possession in that particular time. But my point here is that synergetically, I mean, Jesus, time and time and time again throughout the Bible, we find that during his ministry, it was just as important to preach and to heal. And so this thing that we're doing here, preaching, teaching, and giving you some instruction and guidance on healing, is because God always wanted us to be whole. And when he speaks of whole, he's speaking of the mind, the body, and the spirit. Do you want to be made whole? Mentally, physically, and spiritually. And I don't believe that you can have one without the other two. Can't have one, can't have two. You have to have all three in order to be whole. And so I just wanted to kind of emphasize that. So where are we? We are where there comes a point in time where he had a message. He knew what that message was that he was to bring to people. He had established the method in which he was going to do it. He himself are selecting people now to go out and do what he had already begun to do, which was the method in which he was using to get his message out. And what was that method? That method was preaching, teaching, and healing. And so now he knows, after he's made a huge impact, and now that the Pharisees and the other religious leaders are ready to take him out. We talked about that the last time, that the Pharisees had paired up with the Herodians because they were going to take him out. So he knows that this time is coming. And unlike today, where you generate this kind of popularity, where it says that they brought them all to him, he healed the masses, the multitudes. When you start getting that popular, you know, everybody knows about you around the world relatively quickly because of the internet, because of cyberspace. But we didn't have cyberspace then. We didn't have the internet then. We didn't have newspapers then. We didn't have printed books then. And so Jesus knows this, but yet he knows that this message that he wants to get to the people are the people throughout the ends of the earth. So how is that going to happen when he also, all-knowing, omniscient God, knows that this thing is getting ready to come where he is no longer going to be here physically in the flesh? So how will this message continue to go on in his absence? And that's what he's doing. He's preparing for the future. He knows what's going on. He knows what needs to take place. He has a goal, agenda, mission. You and I should have one in life. We should determine what that looks like and what is required in order for that to come to full manifestation. So he's saying, I need to select some people that will carry on this message. Some people that will not be afraid to carry on this message. Say whatever you want to say about the motley crew. We call the 12 disciples all the time. Don't even talk about Peter or Judas. But in actuality, these individuals had to be extremely courageous because of what Jesus was doing. I mean, he came and just upended everything, started just making some trouble. And so to follow him, to bring forth the message that he had began to proclaim, which was diametrically opposed to a lot of the things that the Pharisees had changed in their law, you would have to be somebody that was convicted and someone that believed in not just the individual, but the message of the individual. We have a lot of teachers, we have a lot of leaders, but it's said that, you know, you're not really a teacher if you don't have your own message to disseminate. And that message has to be characterized by you, so much so that people begin to believe in the message and you simultaneously, and then you have these cults that we have all over the place, where you may not even meet the original teacher, but you feel like you've met them because this person that is now taking on their message or bringing their message forward is almost like a clone of them. And so when Jesus is picking his 12, he's picking 12, it says here, to be with him. Why? So that the message that is within him, the message that is in his heart and his mind, will also be in the heart and the mind of those that are going to follow him, for the simple fact of getting others to follow them because of a message that they're going to send out. It's never about the disciples. It's about them bringing forth the message of Jesus to people to get people to follow Jesus in discipleship. It's very similar to what we're doing. So here, a month or so ago, I think I mentioned to quite a few of you that we were having a clergy summit. And so it's the same kind of behavior. So during the pandemic, the Black church lost a lot of people to COVID, but the underlying condition was their existing health. And typically that was an immune system that was shot. It was diabetes, obesity, heart disease, the big three that plagues our community. And so during the 20 years I've been in business, I've done this a million times at many churches here, especially here in the DMV, across the country, extensively in South Africa. And people are excited about the information. They are motivated to do something with the information for a moment. I've even had people come tell me, especially before tweeting and social media got to be what it was. It's like, well, Dallas, I need you to be with me. I need you to be like on my phone and, be my cheerleader. In other words, I'm not motivated enough myself to continue on this. I experience it. And this is the thing about the types of things that I bring to you are things that will have such an impact immediately that experience is what I'm hoping will be your cheerleader. I think I can get people motivated pretty relatively quickly and easily to start doing something differently or to at least try something. But the continuation of that motivation has to come from you. And I would think that when most people do this, the next morning, if you make this 10-minute dessert dish that I'm going to teach you how to do today and eat it tonight, you've eaten enough sweets at night to know what you feel like in the morning. So when you do this raw dish, you're going to notice the difference in the way that you feel. And that difference is going to be the difference of knowing where your keys are. That difference is going to be the difference of waking up energized versus waking up after sleeping for 6 hours and still being tired. And so that experience ought to be enough to get us going. And so what do we decide to do? That we'll revisit the churches. We'll bring forth the same holistic message with an emphasis on making our immune system as healthy as possible, doing the things that we need to do, and then we'll go from there. And so what's the best way to do that? Jesus came, he had a message, he had to determine what was the method. So my method was going to be, I'm going to reach out to the pastors that I already have a relationship with, and I'm going to get them to reach out to pastors that they have relationships with, so they can say, yes, you can get your people, blah, 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 blah. I'm thinking it wouldn't be such a challenge this time because the churches are beginning to get weak. Someone told me just on yesterday that there are 1,000 churches per day that are closing. I asked him if he had heard of the statistics of how many pastors were committing suicide on a daily basis because of the churches closing. So a lot of this has a lot to do with the lack of support because the people are no longer alive. The people that are alive are sick and or tired. And so you don't have that support. So it shouldn't be, what I feel, a hard sell to get people to say, hey, let's start to do something different. And that's why I put that caption there as well. Follow the leader. Jesus came with a radical change. And that doesn't just take place because you, especially God, the all-knowing God, has this vision and knows everything. You have to still have a plan. You have to have a method in which you're going to execute your plan. And more importantly, the Christian community, Christianity is about group. It's about fellowship. It's about doing things together. It's the problem that Jesus had with the Pharisees is that the word in and of itself, Pharisee, means to be divided or separated, set apart. And that's not the Christian method. The Christian method is that we do things in groups. And so Jesus selected a group of people. And we don't do it the way that we're doing things now in the groups that we're selecting. One of the things that I did is I reached out to my different types of pastor friends. Instead of picking 3 pastors that are culturally the same as I am or culturally different than I am, I reached out to ones that are somewhat diverse in their thinking and their methodology so that they too could bring different people to the table, because this is what Jesus did. When he selected Matthew, the tax collector, who no one likes the tax collector, period. You know, no matter who you are, no one likes the tax collector. And then you have Simon the Zealot, who was the opposite of that. You have one who's unpatriotic, and then you have one that's a fanatical patriot, that they would execute and assassinate people that were holding people under the yoke. You know, when you have the political leaders that are not doing right by the people, you always have a group of people that want to go after them. So you had these people, you had the fishermen, you know, so you had people that were two ends of the spectrum in terms of extremities, in terms of the way that they thought, the things that they probably liked, the cultural differences. And yet Jesus brought them together. None of these people were extremely educated. None of them were wealthy. None of them were theologians. None of them were, you know, high-class people, where today when we think we need to have a movement, or we want to do something different, or we want to have a paradigm shift, that we need to have these exclusive PhDs and, you know, wealthy folks. And that's why a lot of things probably aren't getting done. So this, again, in this short passage, is teaching us so much about how we do things differently, because I think we can all agree that there needs to be a change in a lot of things. And how do we bring about those changes? It starts with you and I, individuals, a single thought in our minds, and putting that thought into a plan and pulling some people together. And so who are the people that he pulled together? People that were attracted to him, magnetically speaking, honestly. People that were so drawn to this man who was causing an upheaval, and who was probably going to be assassinated, and, you know, a dagger on his head. They were willing to go with him anyway, in spite of the danger, but it was something that was drawn to them. And so we're looking for people that believe that, yes, we love the tradition of Thanksgiving turkey and what is it that people have? Tomatoes. What is it that people have on Thanksgiving? Sweet potato pie and whatever it is, stuffing, you know, and the things that are not doing well for us, our immune system, things that are not doing well for us. Somebody to come in, and I have in your little statement there, be the health leader in your family, instead of coming with the sweet potato pie that has the butter and the sugar in it, because I can teach you, which is a great dessert, and it can be done perfectly. Sweet potato is something that's one of the best things that you can have, especially when consumed raw. But there's some ways that we can do it, and you never know that you are eating a raw pie. So it's being it's saying, you know what, I believe in what she's saying. I believe that out of most of the ethnic groups now, that we, the African Americans, are lagging behind. And I listen to people every day, and I get phone calls and text messages every day, and I know we take people where we are, and we're sympathetic, and we have to, you know, treat people with kid gloves in many cases. But it has to come to a point where we just have to start thinking what's important. I was just talking to someone earlier, and they're on their way to a funeral. And they were talking about how they have to go and buy a dress because they can't fit anything that they have. And, you know, I just kind of, have you been to gym? Or are you working out? You know, you got to throw away all your old clothes. You know, you have to just think so hard to be so gentle with people. And that's not even a thought. The thought of trying to actually change the weight gain to get into the clothes that you already have is just not on the radar map. What was on the radar map? She was saying that she had to leave because she had to go get her nails done, to go get her nails done, to go get her hair done. And so it's changing the attitude and the behavior. And I know that I'm not the only one in our community that says, okay, enough is enough. We have to start taking care of ourselves, because our children are off the chain. Our children are off the chain because we're all off the chain. And I believe in what she's saying, and I believe that because I've experienced it, because when I was sick, and I got better those first few days. I had energy and I could think and I could remember where my keys were and what my name was, etc., etc. So somebody out there knows exactly what I'm talking about. I don't think that takes a lot of convincing. I think when we are honest with ourselves, we know that there's a better way. I'm not advocating people to be vegans or vegetarians. I always say 80% of the time do what you're supposed to do, the other 20% doesn't matter. That there's a principle that we should start adhering to: good, better, and best. I'm doing good. I'm doing better than I did last week. This is going to be my best year. I'm just tired of being sick and tired. I am tired of bringing the burden to my family and friends when I'm not well. I'm tired of this sickness having such a financial stronghold on me. I'm tired of being in bondage, you know. And so we're looking for those kinds of people that are willing to jump on board and say, okay, how can we bring about this change in the Black church, in the Black community? And Jesus was looking for the same thing. He was looking for somebody that was drawn to what he was exhibiting in his teaching and preaching. The thing about him being the proclaimer is that he lived out, you know, he talked about love your fellow neighbor and do for your fellow one. So he healed people as he was tired. He said, do not, you know, the woman at the well, you know, who are your accusers? You know, he signaled them out. And these people were drawn to his lifestyle because he was his life was in line with his lips. The things that he was teaching and preaching about, he was living, and he was an example of that. And so that's the thing that he was looking for. He was looking for people that were going to not only be attracted to him in a magnetic manner, but people that were going to be courageous to go out and live the same type of life so that others would be drawn to the message and the messenger, the original messenger, Jesus Christ himself. So that's what that whole piece is about. It's about following the leader. It's about he called them to be with him before he sent them out and gave them the power to preach and the power to cast out demons. He spent 3 years of them being in his presence, living with him, brought them to him so that they could see how he slept and he ate and he thought and he walked, and that they would have a really good understanding of that. And so I always tell people as well, when you want to be well, it is important that you kind of hang out with some folks that are either well or trying to be well also, or else you're going to be in trouble. You're going to be in trouble because people too will sabotage what you're doing because they also want to be well, but they don't have the courage, they don't have the strength, they don't have the discipline, dedication, or whatever just yet. And they don't want you to get there before them because not necessarily, maybe it might not be jealousy or animosity. It's just because you're their buddy and they want you to still hang out with them. I don't know what that is. It's also something that's diabolic in our community. This thing that if we don't want to be our best, but we don't want any other person to be their best. So think about those things. So it's two things that are happening here. I'm teaching you how Jesus selected his 12, and I'm also, you know, there's an appeal to that we're trying to change the health of the Black community. Who's on board? You know, inbox me because we need some help. We're moving, we've got some things going on, we've got some presentations that we're going to be doing, but it's a lot of work, and I'm repeating myself way too often, and there's a lot of other things going on, so we can't do that. So this is a really cool dish that takes just a few minutes. You know, with me, nothing's ever a few minutes, but this is easy. So I don't know, I will post the pictures momentarily, but if you can kind of like just focus your eyes here, you'll see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, basically 5 ingredients and a food processor. That's it. Everything is about raw food. It's so simple and nothing needs to be scrubbed. Once I do this, I literally take this apart and rinse it down with cold water. That's it. Notice I said cold water. You don't need hot water because ain't nothing being stuck to nothing because it's just all natural and raw. And so this is a dessert. And when we think of desserts, we think of that thing that's sweet. So most of the ingredients, this is how you develop sweetness. There is no butter here, there's no cream, there are no eggs, but we do have dates because dates are one of the sweetest foods on the planet, but they are loaded with minerals and good for you stuff. Magnesium, copper, iron. That's what you get in dates. And they're soaking right now. They've been soaking for about 30 minutes in fresh squeezed orange juice. And so that just gives it another dimension of flavor added to it without using orange coloring or orange flavoring. We just use some fresh squeezed orange juice. And then we have some additional things that can be what I consider optional, which will give it some more bang, but you don't have to necessarily use them. So the main ingredients, basically, what we're going to do is you guys have had crumb cakes and dump cakes and things like that. We love them because they've got a little bit of fruit in it, but they've got a lot of sweetness to them. And again, that's usually done with butter and cream and sugar. And so what we're going to do is we're going to do just a little flat thing here. I call it the crumb dump cake. But we're going to do it in 2 layers. You have the option, you can just do, we're going to do it in 3 layers. I have there where we sandwich it in between. But you can just do it in 2 layers if you want to. It got pretty warm today. It's like 70 degrees. I literally can put this together and sit it in this last bit of sun for a couple of hours just so that the top can get a little crusty. Kind of, the great thing about eating desserts that are like this, the dump cakes and things, is when it has that little bit of crunch to it. So you can do that, or we can just pull out the dehydrator and let it sit on the dehydrator, or not. You can just stick it in the refrigerator. All we're trying to do is stiffen it a little bit so that it's easier to cut. So I'm going to put this together for you. And the only thing that you had to do that I didn't do in front of you is that this is oat flour. So we all talk about, when you talk about things that are good for you, people are always talking about oatmeal. It's not that the processed oatmeal is good for you. In fact, it does nothing for you. It's an exercise in chewing. But when you take the raw oat that has not been stripped of its mineral fiber and value, then that can be very good for you. So these are basically, and then my favorite of the oats are still cut oats. And for the women that are out there that are experiencing menopause and all that stuff that comes with that, I always tell people, get you some still cut oats and do 2-3 tablespoons a day. So these are still cut oats. I simply put them into my blender. I have a blend tech and grinded them down to a flour. And so I keep this around because a lot of times I will sprinkle 2 to 3 tablespoons of the grounded still cut oat flour over top of my fresh berries in the morning, sprinkle some honey over that, maybe a little bit of fresh squeezed orange juice, and I'm good. You want some sweetness added to it, chop up some dates and put it in there. So you get to a point where you have your pantry and you have lots of glass containers with nuts and dates and nuts and dates and seeds and nuts and dates and nuts and dates and seeds, coconuts and things like that, and your spices, cinnamon. And you're good. You can make anything that you want to make, a drop of a hat. If some friends come over and there's no dessert, then this is what we do in 10 minutes. And then we go back to chatting, and then before you know it, it's either stiffened from being in the freezer for a few minutes, or we throw it on a dehydrator. Or you can put it into your oven on the warm setting. The warm setting should not exceed 114 degrees, which means that you're going to be good. So this is what we're going to do. Again, the 5 ingredients. This is about 2 large cups of dates. You can play around with this. It's not a recipe in terms of dimensions. So what I usually do is kind of eyeball everything. So the basics of the recipe are the sweetness of the dates, and then the cake part itself is basically nuts and the oat flour. So I have just as many nuts as I have the dates. The dates are squashed down now because they're juicing in the orange juice. Then this is probably 2 good cups, 2 good cups of walnuts. You can use walnuts, pecans, or almonds, whatever floats your boat, whatever you have available. That's the great thing about raw food, is you just kind of go with what you have available. And then this is probably a good 1.5 cups of steel cut oats. So we're going to put our base together. The filling is going to be the gooey, the richness of the dates. So this, I tried to put them on 2 plates so that you could kind of keep in your mind, and I'll shoot this to you later. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use the same food processor to make the filling and the crust. And we're going to use half of the crust, and then we're going to put the filling in, and then we're going to take the rest of the crust to sandwich it. And I just like it like that better. And so we start with basically just putting our walnuts in here. And you often hear me say how we should not consume nuts if they haven't been soaked. Well, the reason that we want them to be soaked is so that they're almost in a pre-digestive state, so they don't do so much harm to the colon. But when you're doing things like this, grinding them down to a flour, then they're readily assimilable. You can assimilate them better. So we're going to start by, this is not going to take long, I'm just trying to give you some information along the way. We're just going to grind these up. Now we want them to be a little coarse, not too much like the flour grinding. You want to have just a little texture to it. Then we're going to add in all of the oat flour. So let me just take the top off. Going to add all of the flour. The thing that we're going to do sporadically is add the maple syrup. For those of you who maple syrup is too much for you, and I don't know if that is for anybody that's already eating sugar and butter, because this is definitely, maple syrup's a step up. And you basically can just kind of sift this around, and then that way when we start to blend again, we will begin to add the maple syrup immediately, tablespoon by tablespoon. That's probably about 6 tablespoons over there. So we're going to play with it until it gets to a point where it's got good consistency to have a base. This is cinnamon. A lot of times I'll use the 5-spice that you've seen me use before that has the cinnamon, nutmeg, allspice, a little bit of pepper. But this is just pure cinnamon. Not for any reason I don't have the 5-spice, but just because. And typically you don't need a lot. I tend to go overboard on the seasonings just because I know how good they are for you. Cinnamon is like cayenne pepper in terms of cayenne pepper being a red food, in terms of it being an arterial stimulant. Cinnamon opens up the arteries that are jammed a little bit. So we're going to start to just put this on pulse. As I start to put a little bit of maple syrup in. I'm pulsing it because, again, I want the texture to kind of remain as much intact. Put a little bit more. See how it's starting to stick? And I'm just going to put it all in here. Add a little bit of water. So I put almost an equal amount of water as I had maple syrup, because I'm going to go in and start to make sure that this has a nice consistency to it so that it sticks pretty good. See? It's got good texture to it, but it's not as soft, gluey-like as I would want it to be. The one thing that I did not have, that I almost never make a dessert without it, is the lecithin. The lecithin, soy lecithin has so many nutrients in it that are so great for you. And I usually buy it bulk from a local health food store, and they haven't had it in a few weeks. I'm not sure what's going on. The other reason that we don't want to drill this down too much, I think I went overboard with the water, is because you want to save half of it and sprinkle it on the top as like a crumb. So it's okay. That's the thing about raw food and making your own thing, is that all things go. So you see the texture? That's just going to be a nice little base that we create. Remember I said we're going to use half, and then we're going to simply set aside an equal amount that we're going to dump on top after we put the filling in. Now, I don't know about you, but the best part the best part of a pie for me is the crust. You know, my grandma used to make pies. We're going to use this again. So it used to always be the crust. So I tend, when I make my raw cheesecakes, people that have had them know that those, the raw apple pies, I tend to use a thicker crust. And then that way, I usually throw some berries on it. And I'll make some fresh raw whipped cream with just simply some orange juice. Throw them in a blender with some dates and some cashews. That makes like a perfect whipped cream, dairy-free, vegan. So we're just doing what you guys already know how to do. Move this out of the way. And that's simply that we're just going to finger this down such that it becomes a base. Now, because it's yours, you can do with what you want. I would typically push it up and make it not just a bottom crust, but where it would be a side crust as well. But since we're going to put the topping on it, we don't need to do that in this case. So that's pretty simple. Is that simple? Now here's the other simple thing. So Jesus picked the 12 disciples. They all had a commonality. The commonality is that they were attracted to him. They were drawn to him. So when you do these types of desserts and dishes, the commonality is the nut piece. Whether it's a flour dough that you're making, whatever the case may be. So that's your base. I'm going to fill this with some dates and some orange juice. You could simply take some bananas and strawberries and put them into that blender, dump them in there, put the topping on top of that, you know, make a cheese, not a cheese, but like a cream crust with more bananas and strawberries, and add the orange juice and the dates to it. You can do whatever you want to do. It's just, you know, because it becomes so simple. Now here's the thing that I am doing. Okay, first let's just get this going. I hope we're not taking too long. Are we doing good on time? This is pretty slow today. I mean, pretty fast. So we're going to that's a lot of dates. And so that orange juice is gonna, you can just imagine how sweet that's gonna taste. So here's the additional piece, or what I call the optional piece. So notice I had some other things here outside of our basic 5 ingredients. So this basically would be our filling. So right now, this is the end of the recipe. Literally, technically, we could stop right here. This is the texture that you have. It's not much. Remember, like a date, like the little date cookies that you buy, the very expensive ones are like $10 per pound at the fancy, remember Garfinkel's at the little bakery shop? And so it's very thin, and you simply spread that onto that very thick crust. But what we're going to do, we would have put lecithin in here. So what lecithin also does, in addition to all of the great nutritional value that comes with lecithin, it's also a fat emulsifier. And because it's a fat emulsifier, which means it goes in there and breaks up that fat that you have, it also gives that buoyancy to whatever you're making. So when we make the raw cheesecake or our smoothies and you add the soy lecithin to it, you get some, you know, to it. So what we're going to do, because I'm always telling you that you want to just do better, good, better, and best, is what is this? This is grounded flax seeds, which I tell you we should get what? 3 to 4, like a broken record, 3 to 4 tablespoons of grounded flax seeds a day. Now I usually sprinkle a tablespoon or so onto my salads. Literally, the grounded flax seeds don't have a taste to it. So when you put it in here with this very sweet date orange juice mixture, it's not going to give you a different taste than what you already have. It will give you more consistency and like a filler. And then, of course, it's going to be cleaning out your gut. So what I also have here is I have orange peel. So you know how you can grind up your own orange peelings and put them on a dehydrator and then put them in a blender, or you could just go to the store and buy orange peel. So I have some orange peel. And then coconut. I think just a little bit of fresh shredded coconut is also going to give it, as if we need this thing to be any sweeter, but since it's thin and we have the thick crust, our crust is not that sweet. It has, what did we just put in there? Just the meal and the nuts. We could have put some dates in there, but when you add the maple syrup, it's already going to be sweet. So this thing here, the dates and the orange juice is like really sugar attack. But then when you add the coconut, it's screaming sweet factor. It smells like orange. It smells like orange in here? Yeah. So, almost done. And then you can add a tablespoon of carrot powder if you want like a chocolatey orange sweet thing. You can add some chopped nuts, some really coarse. Since we went with walnuts, we'd stick with walnuts or not, but walnuts are to me better to use for dessert kind of things. And we could put that in here as well, and that way you're having a sweet, crunchy filling. So that's all we're doing now, is we're just putting it together, which is really simple. My little 3 dishes that I have to rinse out before I head over to the tennis court and the golf course. So if you're one that's trying to get, your groove on doing some things, and you don't want to spend a lot of time in the kitchen, but you want to serve up some desserts and some meals to your friends and make them think that you were slaving over something in the kitchen. I'm telling you, this one here, I wrote in your description, this thing is very eloquent. If you're trying to impress someone, the taste is what makes it, like, it's one of those things that, you know how the German chocolate cake, is it the German, it's the German chocolate cake? It's that, what is it called, red velvet thing? You know, the desserts that you can't really ask for a second slice or a second piece because you know that the German chocolate cake is way too expensive for you to just be gouging on it. So this is one of those. And then, of course, I'm going to cut it up later and take these little, dried out tangerines, and these will actually do better because the slices are kind of pre-sliced. I don't know what the best word for that is. But we're going to go get some nice fresh oranges, real oranges, and slice them, and then take some walnuts and chop them up, and then sprinkle some coconut. And so you'll have the sliced oranges on it, and you can put it on a white plate and dribble it with that little chocolate sauce that we do, made out of nothing but maple syrup and olive oil that lasts forever, and it tastes so much better than anything that you'll get at the chocolate shop. Of course, with a tablespoon of carob. And so now our crumble thing that got too much water in it, but nevertheless, you don't want to spread it on. You want to just dribble it on so it looks like a crumb cake. And so we're just putting globs on by hand. And yes, I think definitely you don't want to necessarily, if you were going to put this on a dehydrator, then you would take some walnuts and chop them very fine and sprinkle them, just a few, on the top, so that when that small amount of heat from the dehydrator or your warm oven, not necessarily the warm sun, is going to put just enough heat and sting to that walnut that it gives it that little, not burnt taste, but that crispy, but kind of like Grandpa used to make the nuts and warm them in the oven when they were just picked off the farm. Not picked off the farm, but pulled from the trees, pecan trees. And that's it. And if you like, you could dribble some of that cinnamon on there and some additional coconut. I think we're done. How's that? That's pretty decent, huh? So again, you could just take a little extra coconut just to give it a little life there. Tad bit of the cinnamon. You may even want to drizzle some additional peel on there, and even a scoop or so, another tablespoon of maple syrup on the top. And you can even just scoop it out with a spoon right now if you want to, but it would be best to put some plastic on it and stick it in the refrigerator, let it stiffen and preserve it. And then when you actually are ready to eat it, just take a small piece out and put that piece in the oven or put it on a dehydrator, and 10-minute dessert. No slaving, no nothing, and probably I would venture to say you're not spending more than $10 on this. And that's conservative. I don't know, because I always have bulk nuts, but you're talking a cup of nuts to, this is probably a $5 dish. And it's going to put a smile on people's face. And you can just doll it up and make it really cute. And if you were bringing it as a dish like that, then I would go ahead and just take some oranges and chop them up into little dices and sprinkle them over with probably some kind of chocolate, like I said, the raw chocolate sauce or something, just for decorative or presentation purposes. But that by itself, and then the way that it smells, people are going to be like, wow, what is that? And then you will be drawing people to you like Jesus sent his disciples out with a message to draw people to them. And then your message would be, you can eat that whole pie and it's not going to add anything to your waistline, especially after all that Halloween candy you had. This is what you want. And so I hope that's been helpful. Let's see. Will we see you before Thanksgiving? We will see you before Thanksgiving. So we'll see you in 2 weeks. I think that's going to be on the 17th. And we'll show you how you can do a meat dish, a raw meat loaf, and some other stuff. We'll do like a little raw Thanksgiving meal for you next week. That's what we'll do next time. See you then. Thanks for joining us.